The number was 182,000. That is not a crowd. That is a city. That is the population of a mid-sized American city compressed into a single open space, standing and sitting and pressing against each other under a Rio de Janeiro sky on the night of January 16, 1988, waiting for one woman to walk onto a stage and justify their presence there. The Maracanã Stadium had held large crowds before. It was built for large crowds, designed from its foundation to contain the kind of human gathering that strains the ordinary vocabulary of description. But 182,000 people in a single venue for a single performer was something the stadium had not seen before. It was something the world had not seen before. The Guinness Book of World Records would confirm it afterward, the largest paid concert audience in history, a number so large it required a moment of stillness to actually comprehend. Tina Turner was 48 years old. She had been on the road for months by the time the Maracanã night arrived, the Break Every Rule World Tour, which had begun in 1987 and would not end until 1988, which would eventually touch 32 countries and be seen by nearly 5 million people, which would be remembered as one of the defining concert tours of the decade and possibly of the century. She had been performing at this level, at this scale, with this consistency, for long enough that the logistics of it had become a kind of second nature. The travel, the load-ins, the sound checks, the specific rituals of preparation that she had developed over decades of standing in front of people and giving them something they could not get anywhere else. But Rio was different. There is a quality to Brazilian audiences that performers who have played there describe with a consistency that suggests it is not hyperbole but simple, accurate reporting. The energy in a Brazilian crowd is not passive. It does not sit behind glass. It moves in both directions, from the stage to the audience and back again, a circulation rather than a broadcast, and the performer who knows how to receive it as well as give it finds that the transaction produces something neither party could have generated alone. Tina Turner knew how to receive it. She had known how to receive it since she was a girl in a church in Tennessee, watching a woman in the front pew cry at the sound of her voice. She had understood then that the music was a two-way thing, that it crossed a distance and arrived somewhere, and that what it arrived in was not passive either, that the person receiving it was also giving something back, and that the whole experience lived in that exchange. 182,000 people exchanging something with one person on a stage. The mathematics of it were staggering. The sound alone, the sound that many human voices produce when they are all moving at once, when 182,000 people are singing the words back to the woman who made them, when that many human bodies are responding simultaneously to a single source. The sound was not something that could be prepared for. It was not something that rehearsal could approximate. You could understand it intellectually, you could be told about it by other performers who had played large venues, you could stand in an empty Maracanã and try to imagine it. But the thing itself, the actual experience of walking into that wall of human sound with your name on it, was something that arrived new every time and required the person walking into it to make an immediate and unrehearsed decision about what to do with it. Tina Turner walked into it and opened her arms. Not literally, though there was something in her physical presence that night that witnesses would later describe in almost exactly those terms, a quality of absolute receptivity combined with absolute authority, the particular stance of a person who is both giving and receiving, who is both the source of the energy and its destination. She walked onto that stage, and the crowd came up to meet her, and the transaction began, and what happened in the hours that followed was the kind of thing that resists summary, because summary requires selection, and selection requires deciding what was most important, and the truth is that everything that happened in the Maracanã that night was most important, that the whole thing was one continuous experience that cannot be broken into components without losing the thing that made it what it was. But there was a moment. It happened somewhere in the middle of the set. The exact song is not certain. The exact minute is not recorded in any account that has survived, because the people who witnessed it were not taking notes, they were inside it. They were part of the 182,000. And it happened like this. Tina Turner was moving across the stage the way she always moved, with the particular combination of precision and abandon that had defined her physical presence since the early days of the review, and one of her shoes came off. Not both. 1. These were not ordinary shoes. They were the specific high-heeled footwear of a professional performer who has been performing in heels for decades, who has developed a relationship with heeled shoes that is as technical as it is aesthetic, who knows exactly what her body can do in heels, and has built her stage movement around that knowledge. Losing one of them mid-performance was not a minor inconvenience. It was, in physical terms, a significant problem. The kind of asymmetry that disrupts balance, that forces the body to compensate in ways it has not rehearsed, that could, in a performer less experienced and less physically controlled, result in a fall, in an injury, in the kind of visible accident that breaks the spell of a performance and reminds an audience that what they are watching is a human being subject to ordinary mishaps. The shoe came off, and Tina Turner kept singing. She did not stop. She did not look down. She did not gesture to a crew member at the side of the stage. She did not acknowledge in any way visible to the 182,000 people watching her that anything had changed in the last 3 seconds. Her voice did not waver. Her body did not hesitate. She moved to the next position on the stage as though the shoe were still on her foot, as though the ground beneath her were exactly as it had been a moment before, as though nothing had happened that required her attention or anyone else's. Because in that moment, nothing had. This is the part that requires some explanation, because on the surface it looks like a decision, like Tina Turner made a conscious choice in a fraction of a second to keep going, to prioritize the performance over the practical problem, to not let the audience see that something had gone wrong. And there is something true in that description. But it is not the whole truth, and the part it leaves out is the more important part. The more important part is that for a performer at that level, after that many years, in front of that many people, on a night that was already operating at a frequency beyond ordinary experience, there was no decision. There was no moment of weighing options, no rapid calculation of costs and benefits, no mental note that said, keep going, and then an act of will in response to that instruction. The keeping going was not a choice made above the level of the performance. It was the performance. It was what the performance was. The performance was an unbroken thing, and breaking it to deal with a shoe was not an option that presented itself, because the thing she was inside of had no room in it for that kind of interruption. Athletes describe something similar, the state that certain performers reach in the middle of exceptional competition, where the conscious mind stops managing and the body takes over entirely, where decisions happen below the level of decision-making, where the person is not doing the thing so much as the thing is being done through the person. Musicians describe it too, and dancers and actors in certain kinds of performances. There is a threshold that can be crossed in live performance beyond which the ordinary relationship between intention and action dissolves. And what remains is something purer and faster and less mediated than anything that conscious deliberation can produce. Tina Turner was on the other side of that threshold on the night of January 16, 1988, at the Maracanã Stadium in Rio de Janeiro, in front of 182,000 people, and when her shoe came off, she kept singing because there was nothing else to be. There was only the performance. There was only the voice and the body and the 182,000 people and the exchange happening between them. And the shoe was simply not part of that exchange, and therefore it did not exist in any way that mattered. She finished the set. She walked off stage in one shoe, and no one in the crowd knew, not because she had hidden it from them, but because she had not brought it to them, had not made it theirs to carry. The 182,000 people left the Maracanã that night carrying what she had given them, the music, the presence, the hours of exchange, and not a single one of them left carrying the information that Tina Turner had lost a shoe in the middle of the show because she had not given them that information, had not treated it as information worth having, had understood instinctively that the covenant between a performer and an audience is not about transparency, is not about sharing everything that happens on stage, but about protecting the space that makes the exchange possible. The shoe was hers, the performance was theirs. She never talked about it publicly. This is the detail that, when you sit with it, becomes the most revealing thing about the whole story, more revealing than the crowd size, more revealing than the record, more revealing even than the moment itself. She never talked about it. In the years that followed, in the interviews and the memoirs and the conversations that a performer accumulates over a long career, she did not tell the story of the shoe at the Maracanã. It did not become an anecdote, did not become one of those stories that performers collect and deploy, the charming behind-the-scenes moment that humanizes the legend and gives an audience something to laugh about and feel close to. She kept it, not out of pride, or not only out of pride, not because she was ashamed of it. There was nothing shameful in it, nothing that reflected poorly on her or on anyone else. She kept it because some things that happen on stage are not for the audience, because the performer is not an open book to be read by whoever happens to be in the room, because there is a category of experience that belongs entirely to the person having it and loses something essential in the telling. She had walked onto that stage and given 182,000 people everything she had. What happened inside the giving? The physical reality of one shoe, the compensating adjustments of a body that had been trained over decades to handle exactly this kind of problem without being told, that was hers. It had happened in the same space as the performance without being part of the performance, and she was entitled to keep it. There is something almost philosophical in this, if you follow it far enough. We live in a time that has decided transparency is a virtue, that the behind the scenes is as valuable as the scene, that the audience deserves access not just to what a performer gives them, but to how the giving works, to the machinery behind the curtain, to the moments of failure and recovery and human imperfection that prove the legend is also a person. And there is something true and good in that impulse. But there is also something that gets lost in it, the understanding that the performance, the thing that happens between a performer and an audience in a live space, is a particular kind of experience that has its own integrity, that does not owe anyone an explanation, that is allowed to be exactly what it appears to be, and nothing more and nothing less. Tina Turner understood this. She had understood it since she was a child. The music was for the person receiving it, not for the person giving it. The giving was total. She held nothing back when she was on that stage, gave every night what the night required, filled the Maracanã the same way she had filled Spring Hill Baptist Church in Nutbush, Tennessee, with the same complete and unreserved commitment to the exchange. But the experience of giving, the interior landscape of what it felt like to stand on that stage in front of that many people and lose a shoe and keep singing, that was not part of the exchange. That was hers alone. The Guinness record stood, 182,000 people, one night, one woman. The number went into the books and stayed there, and for a long time it was the largest paid concert audience in history, and the fact of it, the sheer scale of what had happened at the Maracanã on January 16, 1988 the Tina Turner story. Part of the accounting of what she had built and what she had become in the years since the Dallas hotel room and the 36 cents and the slow, unspectacular, entirely determined reconstruction of a career and a life. And somewhere inside that story, kept privately, not told, was this. In the middle of all of it, in the middle of the largest concert in history, in front of 182,000 people under the Rio sky, her shoe came off. And she kept singing, and the 182,000 people felt something move through them that they would not be able to fully name afterward, some quality in the performance that night that seemed to exceed even what the occasion called for, that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than repertoire or showmanship or even the extraordinary rapport between this particular performer and this particular crowd. They felt it without knowing what caused it. They went home, carrying it, without knowing what it was. It was the shoe. Not the absence of the shoe, not the inconvenience of it, not the compensation for it, not the professionalism of continuing through it. All of those things were part of it. But what the crowd felt, without knowing it, without having access to the information that would have explained it, was the presence of a woman so fully committed to what she was doing that nothing outside the doing of it could reach her. A woman so entirely inside the performance that a shoe coming off was simply irrelevant, not overcome, not managed, not bravely persisted through, but genuinely, completely irrelevant to what was happening in that space between the stage and the 182,000 people who had come to receive it. That was what they felt. That was what moved through them. She never told them what it was. She didn't need to. The thing communicated itself without words, without story, without the behind-the-scenes access that would have made it explicable. It arrived in 182,000 bodies simultaneously and left something there, and what it left was the particular residue of having been in the presence of a person operating at the absolute limit of what they are capable of. Not performing that limit, not gesturing toward it, but actually, quietly, without announcement, inhabiting it. She was 48 years old. She was in one shoe. She was giving the largest concert audience in the history of recorded performance exactly what they had come for. She never mentioned it afterward. And that silence, when you understand what it contains, is itself a kind of statement about what performing is for, about what belongs to the audience and what belongs to the performer, about the difference between a person who does something extraordinary and a person who makes the extraordinary feel ordinary because they have done it so many times and in so many conditions that there is simply no other way for them to be. The record still stands. The night is still in the books, and somewhere in the accounting of it, unrecorded, belonging only to her, is this: a shoe, a stage, 182,000 people, and a woman who kept singing. If this story stayed with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe for more untold moments from the lives of music's greatest legends, the things that happened that no one wrote down, the details that never made it into the official story. And if you've ever kept going when something fell apart around you, tell us about it in the comments. Hit the notification bell so you never miss one of these stories.